All right, hello and welcome back to online English class. I hope you guys are doing well today. Today we're going to be finishing up OTN 2, which analyzes chapters 2 through 6 of 1984. Before we do that, let's just quickly run through the top of the week announcements, keep ourselves straight. By today at 3 p.m., you need to make sure that you send me an email confirming your completion of your close reading of Chapter 1, which was OTN 1 for 1984. That'll be a homework grade. Need to make sure that you're completing your OTNs as we complete them in class. Today we're going to be finishing up OTN 2, and you need to make sure that you are continuing to think about and consider your quarter 4 essay. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back into our OTN. Obviously, we've already ran through our SQ3R for this extended piece of text. We analyzed the party's recreation of the nuclear family and the significance of that in order to develop our understanding of the dystopian setting that Winston lives in. We analyzed Winston's ambivalent or internal dissonance or sort of split between being hopeless and hopeful in his rebellion, all right, which is a reflection of his deeper wrestling, his deeper attempt to free himself from the irrational belief that the man-made institution, the party, is omnipotent, which is impossible, all right? Nothing man-made, nothing that is constructed by mortals can be genuinely omnipotent. However, the party postures itself as such, and using the philosophical system called the Three Sacred Principles of ENG has successfully convinced many of its citizens that it indeed is omnipotent and eternal. That is why Winston has such a hard time freeing his mind from this notion. All right, today we're going to be analyzing those three sacred principles, and if we have time, talking quickly about the significance of Winston's reflections on his night with a prole, which is to say working class prostitute. We'll see if we have time for that, all right? But the big fish to fry here is our analysis of the three sacred principles of ENG, the philosophical system, which is just to say the structure, the way of thinking that makes the party make sense. Okay, so for example, right, just to help us define philosophical system, right, like a Christian worldview or a Christian philosophical system begins with the presupposition that God is eternal, omnipotent, omniscient, and notably good. All right. From those presuppositions, all right, the philosophical system, the ethical system, the view of history that comes along with the Christian worldview begin to make sense. If that stuff, if those foundational principles like God is a Trinity, God is good, Jesus is the Son of God, Jesus' death and resurrection actually happened and meant something for many, many people, not just one person, him, right? If those premises make sense or are true, then the rest of the philosophical system, the rest of the way of life associated with Christianity makes sense. In the same way, right, if the philosophical system that animates or is at the foundation of the party, the ENG party or the English Socialist Party, if they are true, then the manner of thinking associated with being a faithful party member also makes sense. Okay, so in order to kind of illustrate some of these concepts, let's take a look at this very basic graphic depiction of how to know something. All right. And the thing that I want to talk about how you are going to evaluate your knowledge of is a very simple thought, right? 2 + 2 = 4. All right. Now, when that thought crosses your mind, if you are an inquisitive individual, philosophically minded, then you might ask yourself this question: is that true? And if it is, how do I know it? How can I affirm my knowledge of this uh, proposition, this statement? Well, the first thing that you're probably going to do, since you're a human being, is you're going to observe your environment, all right? And you might even, right, count up four different things, all right, putting them together putting together two of those four things in a group, and next to another group of two of those things, and then finding, voila, you have four of those things, okay? So now your observations are beginning to substantiate this thought, this proposition. But here's the problem, right? Oftentimes, we as human beings observe things wrong, all right? We need to corroborate our observations in order to make sure that our thoughts are true, okay? Otherwise, truth is relative to the individual's observation, and observations and perspectives change and differ and grow over time, and they differ according to the amount of intelligence a person has, or the emotional stability of that person, or the psychological health of that individual. And so, if we're going to corroborate our statement that 2 + 2 = 4, then we need to look outside of our own observations, all right? So that's something that pretty much anyone from any philosophical system basically can assent to the truth of. So the next place that we would go is to kind of our historical environment, all right, outside of our own observations, outside of our own minds. Now, when I say historical context, I don't necessarily mean the kind of history that you would learn in Dr. Nato or Mr. DeHaan's class. I mean anything that occurred in the past, all right? And so in the past, if we look for information outside of ourselves to help corroborate this notion, we're first going to have to recognize that people over time have defined what the symbol 2 means, right? So what does that symbol mean? Is that a Z? Is that a snake? What is that? Well, within the context of mathematics, we understand that this is a number, and that number is 2, and 2 represents the presence of one thing and another thing in one entity. It's called 2. All right, and then we also understand what this symbol means, okay, this little cross thing. All right, and that cross thing means to add things together. All right, and we also know what these two parallel lines mean. That means to perform the calculation and then to figure out what is at the end of the calculation, what it equals to. All right, so according to those pre-established knowledge of what all these symbols mean, which we didn't make up, right? We didn't make up these symbols. We had to learn them from our external environment, okay, somewhere. And obviously, that external environment was established over the course of observable history, or the past, okay? We also can observe that people have successfully used this basic calculation in order to build bridges, and to balance their checkbooks, all right, and to accurately reflect and organize reality, matter, the external world, all right. 2 + 2 works. Now, our observations are corroborated with history, and our thought is starting to make more sense. It's starting to seem truer, all right? But, okay, our observations, very similar, if our observations are compromisable and relative, so too can other individuals from the past's observations also be relative and compromisable, all right? Individuals from the past have been wrong about many, many things. All right, so in order to corroborate our thought further and to investigate its truth even further, we might want to begin investigating metaphysical realities, all right? And that is a question about what 2's essence is, all right? And we would assert that 2 is a number that has a stable identity that does not change, that was instituted by, all right, if you're a Christian or a religious individual, God, when he created the world, he also embedded mathematics and the logic of mathematics into that creation, which can accurately describe physical matter and phenomena. In this sense, two is a universal truth. Two is a universal truth. And so, all right, two as a universal truth has been expressed and discovered and described in our historical context. It is corroborated by our own observations, and therefore, when we say that two and another two, when put together, equal four, we know for a fact, all right, on every level, that that statement is true. All right, now, that is how a normal, sane individual constructs rational thoughts. But the party's philosophical system, as everything in Oceana, takes complete and totalitarian control of that process of freely and individually and reasonably coming to true understandings of reality. Okay, once again, remember, the party is in control of truth and reality. There is a ministry of the government called the Ministry of Truth. All right? The fact that the party can assert that it governs truth reflects that the party views itself as the ultimate definer of metaphysical realities. All right? In other words, because the party views itself as the ultimate source of metaphysical realities, because God doesn't exist, and believing in God in Oceana is thought crime, okay? The party, which postures itself or functions as God, can say, all right, when it wants to, that 2 equals 2. But it can also say, when it wants to, because it is in control of metaphysical realities, that 2 is actually equal to 3 or to 1, or that 2 is equal to 2 and equal to 3 at the same time. Okay? If that is true, if the party indeed controls metaphysical realities, all right, then it has every right to alter history in order to reflect those metaphysical realities. And also, it follows that the individual, whenever it is observing its environment, if it happens to observe that 1 plus 1 equals 2 and another 1 plus 1 equals 2, and that put together equals 4, but the party who is in control of metaphysical reality says that 2 is actually the same thing as, say, 3, or war is actually the same thing as, say, peace, then it follows that this observation is what? Not true. That this observation is actually unreal. And believing that that observation is true is something that we would call insane. It is the belief that something is true that defies clear, self-evident reflections of reality. Well, if the party's in control of reality, then it follows that they can control the kinds of observations that their citizens are allowed to have, deeming some insane and others sane. Obviously, the measure of that sanity is the extent to which they align with the party's doctrines, the party's statements. Okay? So, enter the philosophical system called ENG, which has 3 sacred principles: doublethink, the mutability of the past, and newspeak. Okay? To doublethink, which is defined on page 34, all right, is reflected on in or by Winston as he is doing his morning exercises. He basically defines, all right, and meditates on doublethink during the scene, and this is going to help us understand what is meant by doublethink, a concept that is used and at the core of the party's philosophical system. All right, so the party said that Oceania had never been in alliance with Eurasia. Okay, so this is something that the party asserts to be a historical truth. Oceania has never been in alliance with Eurasia. We've always been enemies with Eurasia. Eurasia is completely evil, just as we are completely good. And so, therefore, we could have never, being completely good, never been in alliance with a group of people who are completely bad, because that would not be completely good. Being in alliance with bad people is bad. It is less than completely good. All right. If you are completely good, you fight against that which is completely bad unequivocally, constantly. Okay? But Winston Smith knows that Oceania had been in alliance with Eurasia as short a time ago as 4 years. But where did that knowledge exist? In other words, all right, Winston has a memory, a thought, all right, in his own private mind that defies, okay, that defies the party's statement about what is real or true. Eurasia has always been our enemy because they are completely evil and we are completely good, all right? And we could never be in an alliance with that group of people. Therefore, the historical context, right, reflects that metaphysical reality because who is in control of the historical records or context? Obviously, the party. And that historical context would be insane and untrue if it did not align with the metaphysical reality that because the party is always good and Eurasia is always evil, that they've always been enemies and never been friends. Okay? So Winston remembers something that is contrary to that fact in his own private mind. Okay? That is something that he has observed in his own memory. But where does that knowledge exist? Significantly, right? That knowledge exists where? In his own brain, his own consciousness. And what's going to happen to his consciousness, his brain? It's going to be annihilated, right? His brain is temporal. His brain is weak. His brain will pass away. What will not pass away is the historical record. And who is in control of the historical record? The party. Hence the slogan, who controls the past controls the future. Now, how is that true? Well, he who controls, the party reasons, what has happened in the past and our notions of what is possible because of our observations of what has come before us, right? If you are in control of the historical context, okay, then you also are in control of what your citizens can imagine as a possible future. Okay? In other words, if the party has always been in control and life has never been any different than they say it is right now, which they do. Okay, imagine that. Imagine living in a world that did not have a historical record filled with many different systems of government and many different kinds of people doing many different kinds of things, but rather only one narrative, one power structure, one leader. Even if that defies your internal, individual thoughts and observations about what is possible, all you can do, right, is look at the historical record or the external evidence, and all of that evidence defies your thinking, and you are left alone. Your thoughts die, these thoughts live, and they are, quote unquote, true. Why? Because they reflect the metaphysical reality which is controlled by the party. Okay? As you can see, this is a philosophical system that uses philosophy, it uses thinking in order to destroy thinking. All right? It uses reasoning to destroy reasoning. Okay? Because in the end, if the party can simply define universal truths whenever it wants, however it wants, it means that philosophizing, thinking, pursuing truth for oneself is a meaningless and ultimately unnecessary endeavor. All one must do is obey, submit, not seek knowledge, but rather submit. All right? Hence, doublethink, which is the unconscious submission to the party that uses a conscientious, the sort of conscious mind in order to reason oneself into unconscious submission. Okay? So the faithful party member avoids thought crime by remembering that the party controls reality, okay? And therefore, anything that defies reality cannot be true by definition. If that reality changes, then anything that used to be true is no longer true, and remembering that it used to be true is insane because it's not true anymore. It's not real anymore. It's unreal. You are remembering something that cannot have come to pass. Hence, doublethink, which is forgetting that you have forgotten that the party has changed reality. Okay? It is unconscious submission to the party's control. It is not conscientious submission, but rather the use of reason to induce unconscious submission. Okay, very interesting. All right, it's a way of using thinking to destroy thinking. It's a way of using the distinct gift of humanity, the ability to reason and think through universal concepts and explore metaphysical realities, universals, abstractions, okay? The nature of two, the nature of justice, the nature of goodness, using that gift to destroy that gift, all right? Okay, this is obviously affirmed by another doctrine of the party, a philosophical doctrine of the party, that the past can be changed, okay? The reason why they believe that the past can be changed is because the past is reflected in two primary methods, all right? And this is described on page 39 and 40, and I'm just going to sort of summarize what Winston thinks through on pages 39 and 40 while he is actively changing the past in his day job at the Ministry of Truth, okay? So the party asserts that the past can be changed, which, can it really, right? No. All right, that is another kind of universal truth that is real. It's metaphysically real. You cannot change the past. The past happened, and it happened the way it happened, and you can't change it. But once the past comes to pass, where does it live? How does it continue to exist? Well, it doesn't really continue to exist. It is no longer in existence. It has come to pass. One remembers it or one records it. Okay? And those recordings are supposed to represent what actually or really happened. So the party asserts control over the past because the party exerts control over reality. And if something came to pass that doesn't reflect the updated reality of the party, then it obviously didn't come to pass. So therefore, the history needs to change in order to be sane, in order to be true. In this way, the party is using philosophy, right? Notice all of those were just premises and arguments. The party is using philosophy in order to destroy the process of creating and keeping historical records that reflect reality, okay? In other words, how this works out in practice is the party basically rewrites history on a daily basis. If an individual disobeys the party, they're not killed. They are written out of existence. They cease to exist. They're vaporized. All right? Why? Because their thoughts did not reflect reality. Their life was insane and in that sense unreal. And because the party cannot be disobeyed, because the party is omnipotent, anyone who disobeyed them must cease to exist. Understood? All right. I apologize. I understand that some of this stuff is theoretical and hard to follow. This is after all the philosophical system of the society. All right. It also is borne out in the ways in which Winston has to update the historical records, rewrite news articles, rewrite history books in order to reflect the fact that Big Brother has never been wrong. Okay, that is a reasonable thing to do if it is a metaphysical reality that Big Brother is never wrong. So if Big Brother is never wrong and there is a record of him being wrong, then either Big Brother is wrong, which cannot be true because the party's in control of reality, or the record is wrong and needs to be corrected or rectified. Obviously, the record is wrong. So what do they do to the record? They change it. Okay? The mutability of the past. And then finally, Newspeak. All right, Newspeak is discussed in a conversation that Winston has with his friend named Syme on pages 50 to 52. Okay, basically what Syme describes to him is that the party is rewriting the dictionary of the English language in order to destroy as many words as possible, especially targeting words that help an individual describe the relative goodness or badness or quality of a thing. Adjectives, okay? And in doing so, what Syme and the party is doing, all right, or are doing, is limiting the range of this individual's ability to think by limiting the words that they have, the raw material that they have in order to create those thoughts. All right? Now, obviously, that is a process that requires careful thinking, that requires language analysis and critical reflection, and Syme and the party use language, critical analysis, and reflection to destroy party members and the citizens of Oceania's ability to critically reason. Once again, using these fundamental elements of humanity against the fundamental elements of humanity. All right? Using its power to destroy the humanity of its citizens. All right? Words like justice, words like equality, are destroyed, okay, by the new dictionary, which means that thinking thoughts about injustice and thinking thoughts about equality become impossible because those concepts are no longer real. Those concepts no longer exist within the consciousness of Oceania's society. Okay, so this helps develop the dystopian environment by illustrating the philosophical system that is at the foundation of the party's insane, irrational control of its citizens that uses, ironically, sanity and rationality to support its dominion. All right? Okay, so that's all we have for today. We need to move on. A quick word about Winston's reflections on his night with the prostitute. Basically, what Winston is doing here is meditating on another aspect of the dystopian environment, which is that the party has basically turned sex into something that doesn't bring together husbands and wives in intimate, mutually pleasant relationship, but rather is something that is an unpleasant duty to the party of procreation. Winston ends his meditations on this topic by concluding that desire, all right, desire is thought crime because it is a reflection of the individual's ability to define the good and pursue it. Okay, to desire something, to have a desire, even if that desire is actually bad for you, all right, desiring that thing, pursuing happiness in that thing, even if it's bad, all right, even if it's sinful according to the Christian tradition, is an expression of the individual's ability to define that which is good for him or herself, which is an inherent element of the human being, all right, the image bearer of God, all right. Along that same line, Winston says that one's nervous system was their greatest enemy in Oceana, because a nervous system, your senses, help you define that which is good, that which is pleasant, that which is worth pursuing, and also by extension that which is bad in reasonable ways. And when you begin to do that, you also subsequently begin to what? Defy the party's control over reality, over the good. Okay? Your observations, your senses, your sense of that which is good replaces the party's totalitarian control of your senses as you consciously define that for yourself instead of unconsciously submit to the ways in which the party is defining it for you. Okay? Very interesting. That's where we'll leave it for today with our description and analysis of the philosophical system known as INGSOC. All right, and also with a brief analysis of Winston's reflection on his night with the prostitute. Tomorrow we'll get into chapters 7 and 8 of part 1 and then begin our analysis of part 2 next week. Hope you guys have an excellent day.